acknowledge that we're meeting on the lands of the Kaurna people, and we pay our respects to their leaders past and present. This land was never ceded, always was, always will be Aboriginal land. But first of all, I'd just like to introduce our first speaker, and that's Emeritus Professor Barbara Pocock. She's an eminent social scientist who's been doing research work on employment and work in Australia over the last 30 years. She's focused on industrial relations and the important interface between the work and the family. And she has also provided a fantastic foreword to the book. And given that she's standing for the Senate in the election that's just been announced this morning, I think we're very, very grateful that she's able to be here.
How wonderful to be here, and I'm sure every election event that I'm part of for the next 40 days will be as much fun and as friendly as this one. And hopefully we'll have exactly the same amount of wine and food and smiling faces. So I didn't realise I was first, and I feel a real privilege being first. Thank you, and I pay my respects also to the Kaurna people. It's wonderful to be here. And to remember everything that's happened on this land over thousands of years. We're celebrating the last 50 years of amazing activism and the storytelling out of those last 50 years, but we all know that for 50,000 years there were many, many other stories and many other protective behaviours and conservation of our beautiful coastline. And a frontier war was fought under our feet, a vicious war, and we are a country that is in the process of coming to an understanding about the consequences of that war and its long, long legacy. So always important to remember our long history. I love this book. I loved reading the stories in the book, and I felt very honoured to write a foreword for it. I think we forget how many of the things that we love have been fought over for decades, and that people have come before us and have recognised that a beachfront should not be full of covered with asphalt, that it shouldn't have 15, 20 stories all the way along it, that it shouldn't look like the Gold Coast. It should be a place where your feet can touch the ground and where you can get into the water and enjoy a public facility which is not ruined by bad planning or by the wreckage of what's under the water, the loss of seagrass and all of the things that this amazing community of people have fought so hard for over many decades to preserve. And I walk on the beach often with Mike Elpy and my partner, and I feel appreciation every time, and a deeper appreciation since reading this book for those years of struggle. You were a community and an organisation who, first of all, paid attention to long, boring reports, to long and boring council meetings, to taking minutes year after year after year, to preparing food and making meetings happen, and then endlessly turning up at those council meetings and at the many other places where you made a difference as a community. The other reason I really love this book is that often the stories and the experiences of struggling for our country get lost forever. And so it's a very powerful political act, in my view, to write a book which tells and remembers the stories, because the generations that come after us, when we're long gone, hopefully will remember some of the amazing tactics and strategies and organisation that were used along this coast, and the people, some of them already gone, who made the contribution that they did. And I love the pictures in this book in particular. I love the picture of Anthony Zaros looking so angry on a particular page. And I love the picture of Jimmy also, Fernando and his beautiful photography all through the book. We've got the images of people in that struggle all the way, and some of that struggle was council meetings, but we know some of it was also quite physical. People were roughed up in the process of protecting this beautiful coast. They put their courage on the line, they built the relationships which kept them safe together, and they built a collectivity that made a difference. So I think there are real lessons for all of us out of the politics of this struggle. I think of the history of this as revealing a very stout band of warriors. I see relationships which were strong and a lot of love in a community through these stories, and I think that's also a very strong and a very political act. I think of you as heroes in our community and in our city, and I think often the people who make it to Parliament or make it to the Senate, and yes, I'm hopeful, and I'm doing it because I know that water line is rising. We know, we have the experience, we've got the science. There's no doubt about what lies ahead for our community. We've got communities in the Pacific who already have their lives on the line. And so it's very important for us to have our political figures and people who are willing to go to Canberra or internationally to try and fight for our communities. And we've got people in this room, both Penny and Mark, who have been part of that struggle in our parliamentary sphere. But underneath our parliamentary struggles, we need movements, we need citizens who are willing to join together, to name what they see, to name the parts of our changing climate and environment which must be recognised and fought against at the micro level of local government, in our community organisations, and by organising together with other citizens. So for me, I'm a writer, I love writing, and I've written a number of books, and I have the kind of philosophy that J.D. Salinger has for his novels. He wrote Catcher in the Rye and many other books, and he's a very unusual man, but his view about books is that you write a book and you put it on the bus, you pack it a sandwich, and you send it off into the world, and you never know who's going to pick it up. You never know who's going to read it. What I really hope for this book is that many people, generations ahead, will pick it up and will notice what's been fought for here, how important it is, and how when we have to return to fight for it again, possibly, some of those fabulous tactics, so creative, so funny, the owl, the eagle, the pelican, the seagull, the tern, all of the different things and roles that people adopted, and lively, creative organising tactics. I hope the young people of the future will recognise the bravery, the foresight and the courage that this community revealed for decades, and are able to also remember what a wonderful act it was to take that experience and turn it into a book. So thank you.
Our next speaker is Bridget Wardlaw, and back in the day that was Bridget Bernier. Bridget was president of the Henley and Grange Ratepayers Association in 1998 during the Save Our Beaches campaign. That was all about the opposition to the boat harbour at West Beach. And we opposed that because at the time we had the science that showed that it would cause accelerated beach erosion, that it would contribute to the degradation of our coast. You know, we were right. One of the sub-themes of WACRA is, I think, sort of we wander around going, we told you so, we told you so. Yeah, and I suppose it's some consolation, but if you don't fight, you lose. Barbara oversaw a complex process and went on to make a career as a process management specialist. And she's travelled all the way from Sydney to be here to this event, and we're very grateful for her to doing that and for her contribution. Please make her welcome.
Okay, how big is this lectern? Sometimes I have to take a step to the side, otherwise you only see that. Yeah. So here's this fabulous book, and Paul's stolen my thunder there. I think its subtitle should be "We Told You So." And I have, in reading through the book, I have seen so many bits and pieces where people have said, but we lost. And I have to say, you didn't lose. Every single campaign that we were involved in, we made change. Maybe it was a bit less than they were planning. Maybe it took away all their power to make it far worse. We know when developments happen, it'll come out and they're going to say, oh, it'll be 7 stories, and then lo and behold, when it's built, it's 9, 10, 11, 12. Well, we stopped all of that. We've frightened them off. We've got it controlled. Things are much better. It's not the Gold Coast. It's looking pretty schmick. Apart from the bits that, you know, they're sort of still drifting off up the coast, and, you know, as said before, we told them so. I would like to acknowledge Barb's forward for this. Basically, what she said, I mean, just amazing. There were all of these things. I mean, I was a busy woman. I came into Henley Beach as a most unexpectedly single mother with 1 child, found myself in South Street, got myself a little job at the local council, finished that little job, and then they said, now that you're not working for the council, do you think you could stand for council? And so, in all my naivety, I put out a little pamphlet, and my son and I leafleted it around the neighbourhood, and the next thing there's a knock on the door, and there's this man standing there saying, hi, I'm Jimmy Douglas, I've seen your leaflet, I really like it. Can I be your campaign manager? And I said, my what? And that's when he found out just how totally naive I was about this whole thing that I'd just embarked upon. So anyway, apologies to Jimmy for not sort of doing all that we could have done, because I actually went off on holidays in the middle of the campaign, not realising that was a bad thing to do. But anyway, that raised my profile, and then the next thing I know, I'm invited along to the Henley and Grange Residents Association. The short story is that at one stage, because of the various things I got involved in, I was chairperson of the Henley Beach Primary School, I was president of the Residents Association, I was, most surprisingly, I was the branch secretary of the local Colton sub-branch of the ALP, I was the state president of the Australian Services Union, the president of the Local Government Records Management Association. And when I stood for council, there was one of my opponents who said, you know, she's a single mother, she doesn't have any time to do this. To which my response was, I don't have a husband, I've got lots of time to do this. So I think I might have been doing, I'll show you. So anyway, I would just like to say, my fellow ratbags, my fellow unemployed non-contributors to society, it's all been in Hansard, by the way, thank you Mr Condas. You are wonderful, you formed a community, a family. All my family were in New South Wales, I've gone back there, I went back in 2000. But you became my family. The lovely Willem and Sue Henry Edwards, they were my neighbours across the roundabout in South Street. Father Willem of the church was, they're now up at Largs Bay, and my hosts for this weekend, so thank you very much. And you know, it's just like walking back into all these wonderful friends who have been bonded by the battles, by the boring meetings when Jimmy or Anthony or somebody was explaining to me, and Kate, about telecommunications towers. Oh my God, the stuff we had to get through and understand and know the science and be able to speak to it when somebody shoved a camera in our face. Oh my God. Learning how to do media releases and walking past the Mitcham Council fax machine and sort of slipping the piece of paper in and going, all media outlets, which I'd coded in there very secretly, and just going on, thank you to the Mitcham Council for providing fax services to WACRA. Nobody ever pulled me up. I've got a feeling they were sympathetic. And the cameras used to arrive at council chambers where I was working over at Mitcham, and people would think they were there to interview the mayor, and no, it was me doing yet another thing about boat harbours or telecommunications towers or airports or something. So we were busy, 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 and I couldn't have done it. I can still see Jimmy Douglas coming to my back door with yet another pile of papers explaining to me what the next issue was, and me going, right, okay, just do that while I just get some dinner, Jimmy. Yep, we'll make this happen. And then we'd write another media release, and then into the fax machine to go. And we ended up getting an award. Does everybody remember we got an award for the most hits on any, the most hits for any group in the media for that year, out of anything in South Australia. We were it. We were the media stars. And it's all due to all these fabulous people, this Brains Trust, these people who cared. That's the difference, we cared. And I thank you for your community, for your family, for welcoming me back, for keeping on. The work is just amazing, and don't stop. And I'm taking one copy back for Lord Mayor Clover Moore, who's a neighbour and friend, and she'll be very interested. She started off as an activist as well. And I'm taking another copy for a Greens councillor for the Inner West Council in Sydney, Margarita de Cruz. She's with the Greens, and when I told her what I was doing coming over here, she said, I want a copy of that book. So that's it. Congratulations, my fellow ratbags. You're magnificent.
Thank you so much, Bridget. That was magnificent. And if you want to see an image of magnificence, look in the book at the picture of Bridget conversing with a senior police officer at the Save Our Beaches campaign. And he's about twice as tall as you were, I think. Yeah.
He had to lean over to put his hand on my shoulder to see me off the side. I said, I'm going to struggle if you don't restrain me. And he said, right,
thank you so much. That's brilliant. Our next speaker is Paul Sutton. Paul is the CEO of the City of Charles Sturt. And I looked up, to do this intro, I looked up his LinkedIn profile. And the first sentence of that said, Paul works collaboratively. And then went on to talk about working with council, elected members and council. But I think that sums up the way that we've been able to work with Paul and with Charles Sturt Council recently. That's certainly been WACRA's approach, to work collaboratively with Paul and with council. And our position with council, I think, is we tried to be what's known as a critical friend. We support what council's trying to do, but that doesn't mean that we don't speak up when we think they could do it better. And Paul, of course, has also made a significant contribution to the book, so look him up. And please welcome.
First of all, I too would like to acknowledge that we meet today on Kaurna land. I'd also like to acknowledge Paul as Chair, Bert as Vice Chair, Richard as Secretary and Treasurer, the other committee members, but most importantly, all of you as members. And a very special mention, obviously, to Jim, to Paul and to Tina for the work that's been done in pulling this book together. Barbara and Bridget, excellent words to start. Barbara, you'll do anything to get out of shimmying up a Stobie pole this afternoon, I'm guessing. And if you think sitting through hours of council meetings are bad, I wish you well. I want to start by congratulating WACRA on 50 years. That's a really colossal milestone. Most community advocacy groups are centred around a single issue, and to a large extent I think that's actually something that limits their life. WACRA has been broad. While being mostly centred around environmental and ecological issues, the commitment to social justice, to the arts, and community connectedness, I think, is the thing that makes them different. It might also be a love of wine, which seems to go hand in hand with many of those things. Secondly, most groups, whether they be sporting groups, whether they be community groups, or much more so community advocacy groups, invariably have too few people doing too many things. That leads to burnout, and it also leads to something that often actually characterises the group, and that is the personality of one or two of those people that are doing seriously heavy lifting. So throughout 50 years, what WACRA has been able to do is to weather that storm, manage that, by engaging so many of you over such a long period of time. And I think that's a really important thing to note in terms of why you are still here today, rather than one of those many groups that starts with a burst of energy and then dies out in a short period after. Not only have you weathered those storms, that as as was just mentioned in my introduction, I think that you now exist in the most contemporary form that you ever have. It's a less combative style, but it is one that I think is going to go well in terms of how we work together, not only as council, but with other community groups that are now very much across our area, the City of Charles Sturt, but the broader Western Adelaide area as well, together with other levels of government. I've been at Charles Sturt for around about 16 years this year, and have been CEO for just under half of that time. And what I've noticed is that the maturity of this relationship that was in the early days of when I came was more friction linked, and it felt often like two pieces of sandpaper rubbing together, to be frank. And often that was then played out on the front page of the Messenger on a sort of bi-weekly basis. As Paul mentioned in the introduction, I think we've found a way to work together, and that bodes well both for the council being able to work together with WACRA and WACRA being able to work with the council. I think our elected members were often highly suspicious of WACRA. I suspect that they recognise the power that a well-organised community advocacy group may hold, and at times feeling that their community representative status was very much at threat and at times undermined. To be able to actually work through that in a way, and I wouldn't profess to say that it has evaporated completely, but we're in a much better place to work together now than we ever have been in the past. So I'm super pleased to say that while WACRA's commitment to causes remains as strong and as passionate as ever, we've matured together and found a way to work based on a good level of respect, of cooperation and of trust. Meaning that we both able to spend a lot less time hosing down media stories and the like on a weekly basis or a fortnightly basis. So with those words, I'd like to congratulate all of the members of WACRA for making your contributions to make this a sustainable organisation, because that point should not be underestimated. That 50 years of belonging is also 50 years of achievement, and I think documenting it and being able to record that history, as has been done in this book, is a fantastic thing. So for those of you that are interested in anything that happens across the Western Adelaide, who is interested in community advocacy, and by extension I think local community politics, I commend the book to you too. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Iris Iwanicki, and Dr. Iwanicki is here because I think of WACRA's concern with planning issues and with the broader urban planning environment, not just for our region but for the whole of South Australia. Iris describes herself as a town planner and a historian. She's also a teacher, a researcher, a planning consultant, former, I think, president of the Planning Institute South Australia. Her links with WACRA have also been very much through her involvement and her leadership within the Community Alliance. And the Community Alliance is a peak organisation, a coalition of residents' organisations across South Australia. And WACRA is very proud to have been one of the founding members of the Community Alliance. I think that the struggle for planning reform to put people and communities ahead of the profits of developers is something that we and the Community Alliance and Iris hold very much in common. Please welcome Dr. Iris Iwanicki.
Thank you, Paul. And Barbara, I want to talk to you about how you managed to get that media list, because what an achievement is WACRA. I mean, this is a fantastic book. I've only had a chance to look at it very quickly, but congratulations, all of you. And the Community Alliance has been going for 10 years, and really it came out of the formation of really a session 10 years ago with a particular local issue. And so that year, in the same year, Jim Douglas was one of the foremost people that looked at the formation of the constitution of the Community Alliance. And I might say that you're one of 35 resident action groups and historic societies across mostly the metropolitan Greater Adelaide area. We tend to have concentrated on playing the ball, not the players, in seeking some sort of reform to what is probably the most undemocratic, dysfunctional and opaque planning system we've ever had the misery to have to deal with. Unfortunately, it's not a sexy thing. You know, you can't get out and lobby and put on demonstrations, but we have been consistently lobbying our state members leading up to the state election, and this is a fantastic day to be here and see you celebrate your achievement over 50 years. A need for grassroots activism than right now, and now coming up to the federal election. So I'm really happy to see an independent running here. Congratulations and good luck. In Booth B we've got Joe Dyer, and I think the Labor Party has been doing some pretty good things lately since it's got in. The National Trust is going back into Ayers House, and I hope very much that the wonderful History Trust ends up in that marvellous building of the Freemasons Hall. Look, I think that would be fantastic. So CASA will definitely be writing to the new Minister, Susan Close, for Environment, advocating that and supporting it. And we've also had the Pastoral Lands Bill dumped by Labor. Fantastic. That was a huge battle. And I'll just explain, my background also has been through the Conservation Council for many years. And so I'm very passionate as a planner, having had the privilege of working down in the Wollonga Basin a few years ago when we had a program that nationally was Think Global, Act Local, and the Better Cities funding under the Labor government. We managed to sort of really look at protecting both north and south rural areas from the last crop of housing that might go over fertile land, which we don't have much of. I've been on the pastoral for 22 years. I'm now retired from that, and I am stepping down after our next general meeting, which will be here on the 13th of May. So please, we'll be sending out some notices soon. I'd just like to say that over the years, I think Jim has been absolutely wonderful. He's a great advisor to CASA, and I'd like to pay tribute to him in particular, as well as all you wonderful people in WACRA. And just think, you've got a whole lot of other groups down the coast too who are equally worried about the same issues you are. So collectively, I think CASA's got the potential to be a strong voice at a state level and federal level, along with all of you. So from time to time, we've managed to get into getting involved in some of the planning applications, but it will get worse before it gets better. But I am really encouraged by Mr. Malinowskis' victory speech on election eve, because he talked about democracy, and he talked about the fact that citizens are the most important aspect of government. So keep going, for goodness sake, don't give up. And I'd also like to say Tom Matthews would have loved to have been here today, but I bought him a book, and after this I'll deliver it back to him. So thank you very much for inviting me to speak.
I'd like to now welcome our next speaker, and that's Greg Mackey. Greg is CEO of the History Trust of South Australia. His achievements in enriching the civil life of Adelaide and South Australia are too numerous to mention, from imprints bookstores to Adelaide City Council to rescuing the Festival of Ideas, relocating the Vickers Vimy at Adelaide Airport, the plane that made the first flight from England to Australia. But we should also mention that this book is only possible because of a grant from the History Trust to fund our initial print run. So it's a very important relationship for us. But from WACRA's point of view, I think The greatest contribution that we think Greg is making to the civil life of South Australia is about to be made as he officially launches Listen to the People. Greg Mackey.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen and friends. It's an extraordinary privilege for me to be asked to say a few words at this occasion. It's only, well, it probably was before the pandemic that Jim and Paul came to speak with me in my capacity as Chief Executive of the History Trust of South Australia, and we riffed on, and then a pandemic hit, and we all got about doing things as best we could in the best way that we knew. And it was such a thrill for me when Jim first reached out to say, "Hey mate, the book's happening, and we'd love you to be part of birthing it." And so I did. Now, normally I spend a lot of time scripting my words, and that's just become because of the 10-minute time limit and a tendency to run away at the mouth and a desire to try and be on point and on message. So I duly listened to my heart and decided that I would try and go back to my roots, and that of being speaking from community and unscripted. Then I got a panic attack as we sat down at the beginning of proceedings. Luckily, I had a few scraps of paper in my pocket, so I have had an opportunity to try and condense in the moment a few things to say. I also have learned to script my speech because I serve masters, and most of us do. And most of us recognise that in order to have the privilege of continuing to serve, and that the masters can be our community, the masters can be our employer, the masters can be a government, the masters can be a community organisation. We have to value the importance of words and language and the economy of language. That is probably what primarily guides my scripting. One of the biggest struggles in service of community, whether it is in a grassroots community organisation, whether it's in local government, and I wear one of those hats again as well, or whether it's in public service, or whether it's in the service of a private organisation, is to remain truly connected to your mission. And it is very, very easy in the existential journey of a life, making a home, paying for the home, planning to be able to retire not in poverty, that we sometimes find ourselves drawn away from the fundamental purpose. I think so too in activism, and one of the things that I see celebrated loudly and proudly in the existence of this book is, in fact, a celebration of remaining true to the purposes for which WACRA was formed. It is, I think without any shadow of a doubt, the most significant, longest enduring and important voice of community in greater metropolitan Adelaide and in inner city Adelaide. And quite often it is a case that the more affluent the community, the less reliant a community becomes on rolling sleeves up and actually getting on with the job. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't have anything against affluence, because we're all effluent, aren't we? This book is both an autobiography of the organisation and a primer for how to do local community activism. And the words and the wisdom that has been has been distilled in these pages is absolutely deserving of every person who cares about community to pay attention to. When Barb spoke, I took a note of 3 words in many wise words, and Barb, love your work, and go girl. Bravery, courage, and if I can read my writing, foresight. No? Is that a word you use, Barb? Just got to... I tell you, my writing on the lap, it leaves something to be desired. Anyway, there were 3 words. I've got to write them down. To remain true to your purpose is one of the biggest challenges that any of us who get involved, be it in organised governance, organised politics, organised community. There are so many forces at play, and I really, really, truly pay tribute to Jim and Paul and everybody who's been a part of WACRA's journey. You're sensational, you are inspirational. We're all a product of our learning and our family life and experience and the baggage that's passed from generation to generation. I'm part Scots and part Polish, and therefore I observe, like every compassionate human being on the planet, what's going on in Ukraine at the moment with such a sense of fear and foreboding. And it's not only about, oh my God, what's that doing to my superannuation, which is a very real aspect of everybody in Australia's life, thanks to Paul Keating and National Super. It is just a reminder that evil is only just one decision away from trying to reclaim our polity, our society, our nation states, and so to our communities. T.S. Eliot, I'm a product of my education, and I want to pay a very special singling out tribute to a woman who was never my class teacher, but whose presence at Marion High School was inspirational, not only to me and my generation, but to the generation that followed before it was shut down. Erica Jolly. More than a few times in the last 25 years, I've thought to myself, what would Erica think? And it's true, because your voice and your clarity, and thanks to the miracle of social media, that can reach more people, has been utterly inspirational to me. But in T.S. Eliot's Murder in the Cathedral, of course, Thomas à Becket is awaiting the knights of the king coming to kill him, and he's contemplating his imminent martyrdom, and is visited upon by 4 tempters. The last tempter, spiritual tempter, had these words, and I hope I'm still being true to the text. The last temptation is the greatest treason, to do the right deed for the wrong reason. And I just want to conclude sharing that with you, A, because it's been a guiding maxim for me, but B, because I actually think this book is testimony to remaining true to purpose, and of course the causes, the issues of the moment have changed over the years and then come back again and again to bite us. This is a primer for vigilance, this is a primer for citizen voice, and it is something that I'm so glad made it into both this and a digital form. I commend it and I congratulate everyone involved with it, and I'm really proud to have been asked to launch it. Thank you.
That none of this, the book, the continued survival, the prospering of WACRA would have been possible without the determination, the passion, and the strategic skill of Jim. was going to ask you to give a vote of thanks to Jim, but I think you've just done it. So, Jim, would you like to come up to the lectern now and do your bit? And you've got 5 minutes.
And a special thank you to all of you who have made the effort to be here today. It certainly does the heart good to actually see so many turn up in difficult circumstances, but it gives us some great hope and a future vision that we've got a lot of people that are supporting the work of our organisation. I particularly appreciate the speakers today. Love to hear what Barb had to say, and particularly her preface in the book. And of course, she'll be a wonderful candidate in the next federal election. So look out for her. Thank you so much, Greg, for coming along and launching the book. To Paul, for being our MC today. I threw him in at the deep end. I rang him late at night, I think it was, and said, Paul, you know, are you prepared to do the MC for the job, for the launch? He said, how many people coming? I said, I don't know. I said, we're looking for about 70. And I just had somebody come up and said to me a little while ago, guess how many are here? And I said, I don't know. And they said, 70. I thought that was pretty bloody good. I was sitting at the back there and I was looking at our banner, and I thought, you know, there's the key objectives of our organisation, all those aspects of involving people in all those issues around social justice, about equity, about fairness, and all those things that go along with that. I really appreciated the words from Paul Sutton, from the council. Our relationship with the council has improved immensely since Paul has actually been the CEO and the Mayor, Angela Evans, has taken over as the Mayor. We've actually had some difficulties in times when we've had certainly differences of opinion, but the biggest thing is that we've always been able to sit down and talk them through. So I really appreciate you being here today, Paul, and your contribution. To Iris Wanakee, yes, thank you. To Iris Wanakee, I just think Iris is absolutely a marvellous person. I mean, with the skills that she's got, the knowledge that she's got, the ability to be able to pass that information on to others and to be able to work with our organisation has been immense. And to be able to take these issues to the state government level, first of all to the previous government, and now we're organising to actually take it to the next government. So we're looking for change in the Planning Act. There's no question about that. And so we need that. And we're lucky to have these sort of people in our community. They unite our community, and that's really what we're about. We're about not only taking on the hard issues, but we're also about bringing people together and actually feeling what it's like. You know, have a feeling about what's going on here. I mean, it's all very well to have a vision, but the thing is you've got to be able to feel what's happened. And a lot of people that were involved in the Save Our Beaches campaign, actually confronting by police, being pulled off the picket line, being down there for 42 occasions. I think we were on television, the national and state television, over 150 times. I mean, these people are still here today. They're part of what WACRA is. It's the heart and soul of being able to feel what you're actually fighting for and what you're fighting against, and how you're going to negotiate your way through these things. It's not all about a fight. It's so much of it is about negotiations and about being able to find a way through. Sometimes we've got to give a bit. Sometimes we've got to take a bit. Sometimes we've got to lose. Sometimes we're going to win a bit. So it's all those aspects that are going to come into what an organisation is about, like WACRA.